Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the June edition of Molten Music Monthly. It's a hot and steamy June, and while everybody else is out at the beach practicing poor social distancing, I'm kind of stuck here a bit with a dodgy back, but never mind. As I position myself into some kind of comfortable space, let's talk about what was cool and exciting in the world of music technology, synthesizers, modular, and all that kind of jazz for this month. So coming up, we have Steinberg give us some backbone with some weird drum thing. Ellitone evolves from handmade hunks of wood into some actual proper product. It's the last chance to get in on that endless studio app Kickstarter action. Schlappi reveals the immense 3-body oscillator. 3D PD Modular bakes an entire modular system inside a pie. Black Lives Matter helps us look at ourselves and we discover Afrorack. Steda Electronics and Din Sync both give us a 909. Faded Instruments has some colourful synths. Torso Electronics gets its polyrhythmic, algorithmic sequencing groove on. Serial Instruments has a smashing vactrol based VCA and LPG. ST Modular is back again, and this time with a cool little desktop CV modulator processor thingy. DivKid's third module is all sample and hold. Waldorf drop the Iridium onto your desktop. DROID is possibly the most fascinating CV processor ever. Hainback releases himself as a plugin. Super 16 is shaping up to be one awesome Eurorack sequencer. Dreadbox and Sine Vibes are up to something awesome. And Flurep is a really awesomely weird drone reverb spring thing that I'm never going to be able to pronounce. And in case any of this is looking weird, it's because I've got a new camera which I'm extremely pleased with, but I don't have any idea how to use. So if the colour's off, it's weird, the focus is in and out, I do apologise. But hopefully this is the beginning of a whole new level. I don't know, something or other. But first, Microsoft are giving us a bit of trouble lately. In two ways. There's two things. Last month, you may recall that I spoke about the resurface thing. The idea being that in order to get all of these isolated musicians back up and live performing again, Microsoft has been putting together this blueprint, this idea, this way of getting live performance, isolated live performance, back on live streaming in a fantastic, engaging, interactive and exciting way. And they're calling it Resurface. It's something to do with the Surface platform, and it's mostly headed up, as far as I can tell, by Microsoft UK. Now, they had this event on Mixer. Mixer is the Microsoft's version of Twitch, a kind of a gaming live streaming platform that they would like to convert into some kind of music live performance thing, which is great. We're all into that. That's very exciting. And so they've been promoting this idea that they can do a live performance live stream directly onto something like Mixer and it to be awesome. Well, that sounded quite exciting, and I went along and it indeed was, because what happened was that they gave every impression that the whole thing was live. There was this singer-songwriter called Jade Bird, and she had a guitarist in some other place, a drummer and a bass player. She played guitar and sang, and she was fantastic. It was a great little gig, and we sat there watching, and other people also commenting, how on earth are they doing this? How are they pulling it off? How are they getting this to all sync together? Because not only did they play songs together, they then in between they talked to each other, and the video cut between one and the other, and there they all were, with guitar, with drumsticks, talking to each other, and absolutely giving the impression that this was live. And then at the end they said they'd let us know about how they did it and give us a blueprint for doing this sort of thing ourselves. Fantastic, this was going to be awesome, I thought. Waited around, the videos didn't show up when they said they would. Then they didn't show up again when they said they would, but now they're finally kind of dripped out, and it's like, it was pre-recorded.
One of the challenges that we had in this project was getting the band to play in sync, and we quickly realised that we couldn't achieve that having them all playing live together at once.
It was pre-recorded. That's how they did it. That's how they got around it. The very first video says, yeah, right, this like syncing on the internet business is really difficult. Yeah. No, yes, we know. We know it is really difficult. That's why we were interested in what you were doing. So the guy says, no, it's really difficult. So what we decided to do was create a backing track. You know, we filmed the guitarist, the drummer, and the bassist to do their thing, and then we got Jade to play along live, which is great, to that backing track. And then the other guys just sort of hung out for a bit with their instruments, pretending, and so that when they got to the chat in between songs, it appeared as if they were there playing live all the time, when they hadn't. All their video and audio had been done previously, and they just mixed that in cleverly with what Jade was doing. So just a crushing disappointment. Something which sounded like it was going to solve a massive problem for us didn't. But so we're going to provide you with the tools you need to do this yourself at home. So what is it that we need? He says, well, you're probably going to need a camera and some software. But that was about it. He said, never mind about all this posh stuff we're using. We're using special video things to suck this stuff in here, to send it over there. We're then using some guy who's measuring the delay between this and this and being able to offset the backing so that it matches up, lip syncs perfectly with what Jade is doing, and all this other stuff going on. But, you don't have to do that. You just use software. Well, I assume he's referring to something like OBS or vMix or something. So essentially what they were saying was, what you could do as a live performer is create a backing track with your band and then play that locally to you and sing along to it. which is what we've been doing anyway. So all I'm saying is that the whole thing was a complete waste of time. I mean, it was a great thing to put on Mixer, and I hope there's more live performances of that sort of nature. But as for making it interesting for people to be able to do this themselves, that's just nonsense. They had solved nothing. They just showed us that with really good equipment, you can do a really good job of it. Super. The other thing is that Mixer is now dead. They are turning it off in July, I think, and trying to migrate everyone over to Facebook video. Will that be any better? Who knows? Anyway, enough about that. What's perhaps more important is the second thing. In the May update, which is called, confusingly, the 2004 update, which has nothing to do with the year, it's just the number of the update. So in the May Windows 10 update, Microsoft have removed connected standby. What does that mean? It's a disaster. It's a complete and utter disaster. So anyone who follows my Surface blog or my Surface videos, when I'm talking about using the Microsoft Surface and other laptops for music production, there are certain things you need to tweak in the operating system in order to make it work. You can install software on your Surface or any other laptop, a little bit of software, add a keyboard, play some sounds. Yeah, it's going to work. But once you start getting a little bit beyond that, once you start arranging music or once you start playing with bigger software instruments, you start running into problems with clicks and pops. Doesn't matter how fast your computer is, doesn't matter how much RAM you have, you run into clicks and pops, particularly if you're using a USB audio interface, because the processor in these laptops is designed to shut down all the time. It doesn't want to turn on, it wants to shut down, it wants to save power, it wants to give you a long battery life. The effect of that is that when it needs to speed up in order to cope with real-time low latency audio, it struggles to do that. It goes, oh my goodness, and then gives you a glitch. You get a little pop, a little click. Not masses necessarily, it depends on your system, but it's there. And thankfully, I discovered a way to cure it, and you cure it by disabling turbo mode on the processor. It's very simple. It takes a little bit of a registry edit because they've been stripping this functionality out of the OS for a few updates. So it required a little bit of registry editing just to enable or disable something, can't remember which round it is, that gave you the proper power profiles within Windows that allowed you to turn off the turbo mode. It's a very, very simple way of getting a complete, stable audio performance out of one of these modern hybrid or super duper laptopy type things. Now, Microsoft have removed it completely. There's no registry edit. You can't add anything to the registry to enable it. They've taken it out completely. So if you're familiar with the power plans within Windows, those are now gone. Those are gone. and so you cannot get into those advanced settings. All you're going to get is a slider on the side where you go high performance to battery saving performance, and within that Microsoft does its own thing in order to, you know, maximize performance or maximize battery life. But that does not include disabling turbo, which means that as soon as you get that update, your system is going to glitch. It's going to glitch. That's it. So I don't know what to make of that. I mean, none of my surfaces have as yet updated to that update, so I can't test it out. So currently all mine work. They're fine, and all my instructions on getting to connected standby and disabling that and disabling the turbo mode all still work. So when this happens, I'm going to have to look into ways of getting around it. I have to find a solution. There are bits of software like throttle stop and other bits and pieces which potentially can do a workaround to make this happen. And if you're aware of any other piece of software that does very, very sneaky back-end power stuff, then do let me know, and I'll see if that has any help, because this could be a complete disaster. I'm not quite sure what to do with it, because it's the only solution. I mean, remember that big Zen computer that I had with the 2 screens? It looked really cool. I mean, it was massively powerful. It has as much power as most desktop computers. Enormous amount of CPU power. It would glitch just playing a single instrument. There it glitches again. Because of exactly this problem. Turn that off and it was all completely beautiful, and you could run gazillions of instruments and tracks and stuff. But with that on, it's useless. It's completely useless. Oh, don't know what to make of it. I'll report back when I have more information. Steinberg's Backbone is a bit of a weird one, as in I can't work out what it is. It's one of those situations where Steinberg do a fantastic bunch of marketing, but never actually tell you what it does. Looking at it going, but what is it? I don't know, even now. I'm not sure. Maybe I think I might need to go off and watch some videos and come back. Well, I don't know. They call it, right? It's a drum design tool, and you can layer up samples, I think. So you sort of start with samples, and then you have 8 layers of samples that you then re-synthesize into creating new and exciting other sorts of sounds. I'm still not explaining it very well. So it's something about layering up sounds. It can be audio from anywhere. You can take audio from any place, layer it up, re-synthesize it, apply filters, amplifiers, and this kind of cool, kind of chunky interface, which looks really nice. I just can't work out what it's about. So there you go. I'm just going to throw that way in there and say, no, I don't really have a clue. Steinberg Backbone, some kind of drum re-synthesizer thing. By all means, tell me what it's all about in the comments, or go and have a look for yourself. I guess it's going to be one of those days. Now, our man at Electronics is kind of evolving. It's really interesting. He used to make these very short runs of handmade bits of wood type instruments. So some kind of piece of wood, piece of driftwood he'd found on the beach somewhere that he'd fashion into an interesting instrument with knobs on the top and some kind of electronics inside running some kind of synthesizer. It would make noise and weird stuff, but always look amazing and just be just a sort of a fascinating object. Well, it's kind of moved on and it's now become Ellitone, and he started to release what looked like proper products. I mean, something is lost in that, I really like the handmade wooden kind of vibe of it all, but now he's wanting to do something which is going to be more perhaps productive, more mass market, more, maybe even make a living from, that kind of thing. And one of the first ones of these is called the Ellitone E64. What is it? Oh, I don't know. I'm having a day. It's kind of a multi. The idea behind it is that it's some kind of sequencer, not the sort of sequencer that you just punch in sequences and off you go. It's the sort of sequencer that develops and evolves and takes you to different places. So rather than you having to come up with a melody, it self-generates melodies that you then tweak and play with and push in different directions. Quite like these sorts of things because, whenever I sit down with something just to play, you tend to end up putting in the same kind of sequence. and then just sort of sound designing around it. Whereas with this, it's creating sequences all the time, and I think that's quite fun. Inside, you've got a 12-voice wavetable synthesizer, so you can poke it towards all those different sorts of sounds, and there's lots of different waveforms that you can blend and move from one to the other. It's kind of a disappointing looking box. I mean, it's a handheld kind of thing. Looks like a handheld gaming console with a few buttons and a nice sort of LED thing on it that lights up, a few knobs and bits and pieces. I just really like the wood stuff that he did, but never mind. It does seem like a really fun device to play with. The Endless app has been delighting us on the iPhone for ages. It's the idea iPhone app. You make loops, you play a few things, sing into it, stuff your guitar in, that kind of thing. Goes up to a thing, goes out to other people add loops, mess about with it. It's great. It's fun, it's addictive, it's a collaboration tool, and that has now been brought into the studio by there being a VST plugin version that they're working on. This is currently on Kickstarter. There's only a few days left if you want to get in on the sort of Kickstarter pricing, because it is also moving from being a free app into being something that you're going to have to pay for, because there's all sorts of servers involved in storing of projects and that kind of business stuff going on to allow this thing to happen between studios that's going to require a little bit of cash. So that's where we are. But what's exciting about it for me is that I'm no longer going to have to fart around with a phone trying to get sound into that to make that happen. It can just run purely within the master bus of my DAW, and I can route through anything you like. Guitars, synths, modular, anything I can route in, and then I can pull stuff out, drop that into my own project, whatever. We've had chickens move in next door. It's just a joy. It's just a joy, it is. Hey. Anyway, so it's a really cool thing. I did a Molten chat with Tim Exile from Endless just a couple of weeks ago. That's in the YouTube channel, so go and check that out if you want a bit more information about him and about what it's all about and where it's going. But it's really the only thing that I've seen since Res Rocket Networks back in the day that offers the opportunity to really spin ideas between different people in different places and to work and collaborate on something in real time. Now this is a huge thing. It's called 3-body. It's an immense oscillator of some kind that apparently Eric Schlappi has been working on for ages. I don't know about these sorts of things, but it's a 3 oscillator module that is able to feedback and flow and morph back through itself in really interesting, exciting ways. It's FPGA based, so it's all computational going on behind the scenes, and it can handle all sorts of waveforms, and it's from that point that the modulation cascades out of itself. So you can frequency modulate, you can phase modulate, you can amplitude modulate. Every signal path sort of messes with the nature of the other signal path, either in some kind of sync or in some free flow madness. And so it becomes this mess of evolving digital sound, noise, modulation and zaniness in a brilliantly hands-on and stereo-infused module of the gods. 3D PD Modular is completely fascinating. It's this entire modular system, a hardware system that looks amazing. It's versatile, it's full of potential and sound and craftiness and possibility and darkness and colour and tone. It's very, very interesting. It's also remarkably affordable. I mean, an 84 HP case full of stuff is going to cost you about $600 or something. Or you want the whole whack, then that's more like $1,500. But for an entire modular system, it's quite extraordinary. But there's a few buts. I mean, what this is, I tried to work out, because from the initial marketing, it was like, it seems incredibly impressive. But once you start digging down, you start to discover actually what it is. The hardware, the front end to it, is essentially a hardware controller for a software modular system. It's all running on a Raspberry Pi, a single Raspberry Pi in the back that's running software that does all of the synthesis side of things. And so what you have in the hardware is purely a controller for that. So there's not really much in the way of control voltage or sound going around. You're purely making digital connections that connect into the Raspberry Pi. So I mean, I questioned the guy about why he was using banana plugs, and essentially it's so he can create a barrier, he said, between this and Eurorack, because it looks very Eurorack and it's in the Eurorack format in terms of sizing, but it's not dealing with control voltage, it's dealing with digital signals running between different parts of the Raspberry Pi. So you can't match it into another modular system, you can't take CV out, because it isn't CV out, it's some kind of other digital signal or something. So what I'm getting to is that it's a fantastic idea, but you have to treat it as like a self-contained system. I mean, there's going to be MIDI, of course, MIDI can go in different places, but as far as the system itself goes, it's very much a self-contained modular system, if you like, almost like a MIDI controller hardware front end for something like VCV Rack. Although it's not that, it's a self-contained thing, and you can program it to do whatever you like. In the background, you can start coding within the Raspberry Pi to define exactly what all the different modules are doing. So fascinating, interesting, slightly misleading, I think, in what you see. So you just got to make sure that you understand what it is entirely before you take steps towards purchasing it. Now, anyone with half a brain and half a heart has been deeply affected by the whole Black Lives Matter movement and protests that have been going on over this last month. It's been an extraordinary time, an extraordinary movement, extraordinary amount of action and passion and stuff has come about because of the terrible treatment of black people in America is what sparked it off, but also it's come to highlight racism in all its forms globally, and has given us a good opportunity to look at ourselves and say, what the heck are we doing, and how are we participating in a racist system, and what can we do actively to push back against that. And it can feel sometimes that we're very isolated from these sorts of things. If you're not living in a major urban area, then there isn't necessarily any protests going on, any way you can feel involved with that. And like me, living in Norfolk, it's rare that I meet anyone who's anything other than white. So during these extraordinary events, I was always looking for, so what can I do? How can I help? What can I contribute to this, to lend my support, to lend, I don't know, my money, anything that I can. So anyway, in my looking, I noticed a tweet from Milo Melodies about Afrorack. Now, Afrorack is a Chicago-based education modular scheme run by a guy called Aaron Geis. And he takes little modular systems based around the Mother 32 into communities within Chicago that are predominantly black communities, and just opens it up to people, shows it to people, gives them the access so they can play. That sounded like an awesome thing. And just at that time, they happened to be having a little fundraiser because of COVID-19, they can't do any workshops. They got no money coming in. The whole thing's going to collapse. So he was looking to raise about $5,000, which seemed really reasonable to keep something like that afloat. I mean, at the time I was looking, they had about $3,000, and I thought, well, that's really cool. That's something that I can support. So I gave him a couple of quid and then wrote it up for Gear News. And sort of like after that, it just started to soar. Other people picked it up. Bo Beats picked it up. Other people, other news outlets. Everyone was suddenly sponsoring Afrorack, which was brilliant. I mean, one could say, oh, everyone's just jumping on a bandwagon. Yeah, it's a flipping awesome bandwagon. Let's jump on that one. Because something like this is perfect. It's fantastic. It's about our industry. It's someone out there doing something in the community, which is fantastic. And it's something that we can really highlight and push forward and support. And God knows he needs the money. At the moment, at the time of recording this, their total is 30 grand, which is awesome. That's so fantastic. Now, I hope to get Aaron onto my Molten chat at some point to have a talk about it, because I think that could be a fascinating story. But who knows? He's too busy at the moment, or maybe he's just being polite. I don't know. And also, since then, he's picked up a whole load of sponsorship from everybody. So it's like a fantastic success story of what can happen if we just look about ourselves and outside of ourselves and get involved just a tiny bit, And now it looks like he's also released a module, not entirely sure, I just kind of spotted it on Instagram this morning, called the OR, which has got Afrorack written on it, which allows you to swap between two different signal things. Cool, great. Do some more stuff. We'd love to hear more of this sort of thing that we can highlight. That would be awesome. But the other conversation that's come up around our sort of industry is the terms that we use. And perhaps this is a great opportunity for us to move on from some of the terminology that we use very, very casually, like master slave. It seems innocuous. It doesn't seem to mean anything other than you know what a master is, a master timing clock, and you have things that slave off that. I mean, that's normal, isn't it? Yeah, it kind of is. But it's also, it creates some other feelings and tones around it. Is that important? Yeah, I think it is, because these are words, and these are words that we can do something about. It takes zero effort for us to do something about that, to no longer use those sorts of terms, to no longer use that kind of imagery. So what on earth are we going to use instead? You say, well, we could use something like main and secondary, primary or secondary. We could use leader, follower, host, client. I mean, one of the ones I quite like is source and sync, but spelt S-I-N-K, which it comes from the German. Apparently that's what they use anyway for master-slave terms. And source and sync, because it sounds a bit like sync as in timing sync, that kind of works for me for some reason. But apparently the most popular is main and secondary, which is fine. So let's start doing that. Let's just do that as a community, as a group, as a bunch of people, because it costs us nothing, and it just enables us to make our environment, the place that we work, the place that we spend time and enjoy, it makes it a better, healthy, more holistic place. It's the verbal equivalent of taking down the page 3 calendar off the wall, in your staff canteen. There are two new 909 project DIY type cloney type things happening. I mean, of course, we're all still waiting for the Behringer one, but I don't know, we're just going to be waiting forever by the sounds of things, and who cares anymore? There's a new one from Din Sync, of course, who make all sorts of fantastic clones of old Roland gear. They've got one on the way, and so do Steda Electronics, who have one that they're calling the SE 909. Both of them are based on the original Roland TR909, of course, and both appear, as far as I can tell, to be coming along as DIY kits. So it's the sort of thing you can spend a weekend chiseling away at, soldering away at, in order to produce this awesome vintage 909 sound that we all seem to love so much. The Din Sync one has been led by Christian Hartig, and he says that this is his farewell gift to the DIY community, whatever that may mean. Neither of them are available quite yet, but I would probably put money down on something around the 9th of September being a possible release date. These look fun. Faded Instruments launched themselves with 3 unbelievably colourful virtual instruments. The first one is called Blumen and Pflanzen or something. Plants and flowers is the idea, and it's something along the lines of an unpredictable pulsating FM synthesizer thing. It creates grooves, it creates rhythms, it spasms itself around with FM synthesis and all sorts of crazy zany digitalness. It's less sort of sound design and more kind of sound destruction with XY pads in order to push parameters all over the place to create new and exciting tones. The next one is, they're calling it a mega modular FM instrument. I'm not entirely sure how mega it is, but they call it Slimer FM. It doesn't really have enough controls to consider itself mega, I would say, but what is interesting about this is that you use audio from your system, from your DAW, as the modulator. So normally in FM synthesis you have a carrier and you have a modulator. The modulator stuffs itself into the carrier and creates all these FM tones. With this fella, it has the carrier, and you control a bit over that, and then you stuff in a track of audio from anywhere you like, and that becomes the modulator. So the idea is that your entire DAW becomes an FM synth. Okay, that's a bit more mega. That's a bit more mega, I suppose. So you can have tracks and tracks of this stuff going on. What that would sound like, I have no clue. But it's an interesting idea. And finally is a genius little synthesizer called Ghost Tones. The idea of this, in some ways it's just supposed to wind you up, I think. The idea is, whatever note you press, it will deliberately play a different one. or 2 different ones. So you'll never get the actual tune you're after. It will always play something else, which is, I don't know, I mean, that's a recipe for complete madness, I think, but that sounds like quite a lot of fun. The T1 talks about being fluid, polyrhythmic, algorithmic, and all those sorts of things. What it is a little desktop sequencer. We are loving these. There are so many of these sorts of things coming along at the moment. It's just extraordinary. It's an extraordinary time to be into desktop boxes, because this is another sequencer. It's got a bunch of buttons on the top, bunch of knobs on the top, otherwise fairly featureless, and you get stuck in with your polyrhythmic, algorithmically fluidy sequencing kind of job. I mean, it's the sort of thing that's very common in Afrorack, where you have some kind of sequencer that randomly creates melodies and tones that you then mess about with, and this is wonderfully finding itself now on the desktop in these sorts of boxes. So this one is entirely MIDI based. There's no CV outputs or anything sneaky like that. It's purely for MIDI, and it generates patterns and melodies in a generative way using apparently very musical algorithms, or at least ones which are musically relevant, in order to try to keep the thing together. So it's not looking for experimental tones necessarily, it's looking for melody, for patterns, for grooves, and the ways of manipulating and evolving and changing those as you play. I mean, that's a whole load of fun right there. It has Euclidean rhythms and structures, you've got arpeggiating melodies, and you can control parameters on multiple tracks simultaneously. It certainly looks impressive, and the sort of melodies and stuff that's coming out of it just seems quite extraordinary. So it looks like a lot of fun to play. It's on Kickstarter, they've already funded, so it's going to happen, and you've got to be probably quick to get any of the preferential pricing. I'm a fan of serial instruments, and when they come along with a new module, I always like to give it a bit of a talk up, and their latest one is called Thump. It's a vactrol, low pass gate, and VCA. There you go, that's fun. There's a drive circuit built in and also a bit of crossfading, and you can select between a regular VCA mode or 3 different types of low pass gate. So ultimately you get kind of a nicely gritty and fat sounding module in which you can play with crafting some rather nice distorted tones. So, you know, good, solid, simple, interesting, useful stuff. I hope to do a review of the kit if I can get my hands on one. I talk far too much about ST Modular because he keeps releasing loads of stuff that's just really interesting. One of these days I'm going to get around to building some of it. But this month he's come up with just another little genius idea. It's a little box, right? Like the size of a tobacco tin. And it's just full of control voltage utilities and modulations. And it sits on your desktop. It's not a Afrorack module, it's just a little thing, a little box, it's on your desktop. You plug it in via USB to power it. And you get a mulch, you get some LFOs. You get a 4-channel mixer / attenuator, a crossfader, and a channel swap. It's an ideal companion to a little desktop synth like the Neutron or the Crave or the Mother 32 or the No-Coast, anything that has CV-able stuff going on, and you just want to throw in a bit more modulation to just expand the ideas that you can have in the thing. It's the perfect little box for that. I think it's available only as a DIY kit again, but I mean, I've been talking to Stefan, and he is considering the idea of getting stuff that's built that he can just sell straight away. It's just a matter of balancing up time and expense and all those sorts of things. But I think that would be a really good thing for him to do, particularly on a product that has such mass appeal as this one does. DivKid's at it again. This time it's called the random step. The random step. I've got one here. I got hold of it as soon as I came across it. I have not plugged it in or looked at it yet. In fact, this is the first time it's coming out of the box. This one he's made with Steady State Fate SSF. And what's the idea? Oh, I don't know. I'll work it out at some point. But it's all sample and hold. You've got like 3 lots of it, which each have 2 lots of sample and hold or something, and you get cascade normalization from the thing down to the thing, and the thing. So, I mean, lots of randomness is the idea. You sample something, hold that, send that out, and then randomize that in a different. I haven't really looked at it. I'm sorry, but DivKid himself has got lots of information on this website all about it, and I'm going to do a review of it myself when I can get around to it. I've got a lot of work on it at the minute, and having like a bad back, I can't do much at all. So everything is backing up. Everything's backing up. But that's the random step from DivKid. I'm sure it's awesome. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. The Waldorf Iridium got leaked all over the place before it officially came out. And what it is, it's taking their Quantum. The Quantum is this massive, extraordinary multi-synthesis synthesizer of the gods type thing. Big screen, waveforms, all sorts of different things going on. It's taking that massively expensive synthesizer keyboard and dumping it into a decent size desktop unit and shaving the price down massively to make it the sort of thing that perhaps normal people can kind of attain. Possibly. I mean, it's still not cheap, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot more affordable than the flipping keyboard was. So what is it? It has 5 different forms of synthesis inside it. You've got wavetables, you've got virtual analog, you've got particle, which is essentially sampling and granular. You've got a resonator and this weird thing called kernels, which also featured sub-oscillators giving you 6 operator FM. So it's got a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff inside it, massive display, lots of gorgeous waveforms and stuff and modulation you can do on that. It has 16 voices as opposed to 8 voices, which is what the keyboard has, which is quite interesting. And you get to use 3 oscillators and 3 digital filters on each voice. So you choose which form of synthesis you want each oscillator to be within that synth thing you are synthesizing. It's packed full of effects, packed full of modulation, packed full of all sorts of really interesting routing and matrixing and the bouncing of signals and morphing from, I mean, it's one of those things which is a fantastically fabulous desktop digital synthesizer. If you like messing with sound, that's the sort of thing really that you should be looking at. It does have this rather sort of pointless 4x4 pad thing over on the right hand side, which I think is supposed to be some kind of keyboard, a bit like the Hydrasynth has. You kind of wonder, is that useful? I don't know, but it's there. I mean, there you go. Another thing that's quite cool that the keyboard didn't have is that it has a number of CV inputs, so you can route in modulation from other places as well, because modulation is really what it loves to do. You've got all these parameters that you can set up in multiple ways, all tied and synced to each other, and move them about with things from your modular. How fantastic is that? So at about $2,000, I think it's shaping up to be an extraordinary desktop synthesizer. The DROID Universal CV Processor. Now what the heck is this? This is an extraordinarily colourful and possibly the most fascinating module ever from a guy called Matthias Kettner. Now Mr. Kettner was the guy behind the Sinfonium. What's that? Well, it's a Eurorack module, an extraordinary Eurorack module that would kind of run an entire show. It had chords and quantizing within it. It was initially picked up by Instruo and then made by Audiophile Circuits League, I think it is. And it's an immense module for running an entire live performance. Very, very clever, very, very good, fantastic. Now he's turned himself to something else, which is called DROID. Now this is a collection of modules. It's a main module that I can really only describe as a bit like a disting. But this main module has 8 CV inputs and 8 CV outputs. And what it does inside is entirely up to you. You program it using a very simple programming language that's put into a text file and loaded in, and it does whatever you tell it to. So it can be an LFO, it could be a sequencer, it could be an attenuator, it could be a modulator, an envelope, a logic gate. Anything you could really think about and think of and program in, it can be those things. And the interface is fantastic. It's all lit up with these gold numbers and lights behind it and stuff going on. You can expand it with other things to give you more CV inputs and outputs or gate outputs. So you can once again run an entire show from it. As I say, it's a bit like a disting in that you can put all sorts of different algorithms in it, but these are algorithms you're just programming yourself. You tell it exactly what to do, and you tell the knobs what it is that they're doing, and you have these extra control knobs which are mapped into those bits as well. So you can create like an entire panel of droids and expanders and controllers for that to control every aspect of the CV generation that's coming out of those things. It's amazing. It's also the sort of thing you could start off with one and then just start expanding. And you've got all of these ins and outs. Unlike with the Disting, you've just got one thing going in and out. Or if you've got the X, you've got a couple of things going in and out. This is 8 in and out with every single one. As a minimum, you've got 8 things going on if you want. And it's the sort of thing which is going to endlessly evolve as people write more patches for it and write stuff for it and sharing them and swapping them and loading them in. What a fantastic thing. This is fundamental. This is Hainback, the plugin. Hainback, if you don't know, is a lovely guy who makes crazy music with old bits of test equipment. Gets old stuff, old oscillators from a gazillion years ago, squeezes them together with old bits of other junk, wires the thing in and makes extraordinary music. I have one of his albums. It's fantastic. It's a great thing just to unwind to as these noises and sounds and movements just pulsate and glow about the place. And as I say, his particular thing is old sort of test equipment that you find knocking around in old evil Russian laboratories and German underground bunkers. That kind of thing. Anyway, he's got together with Sonic Lab to create the plug-in version of that experience, I suppose. It's based upon a vintage Roden Schwartz oscillator, which is packed full of vacuum tubes and is the sort of thing that Stockhausen used. So they take this raspy, fat sound and then make 8 of them and stick them into this one plug-in, and then you can offset them and move them around and create tones and harmonics and different frequencies smashing into each other, modulation, detuning, all that kind of wonderfulness. It's got all sorts of things like polymorphic resonating wavetable morpholiths. And stochastic modulations and other crazy stuff, man. It's a crazy thing. But obviously, like Hainback, it's really, really nice and it's lovely and it's beautiful and it creates these raspy sounds and then tinkles and then other sounds and then grit and then horror and then, that sort of fun. This looks rather good. Super 16 it's called. Nice chunky Eurorack module for sequencing. What's good about it? Well, another sequencer, but what's good about this one is the way that you can control the motion of the 4 knobs at the side. You've got 4 knobs that controls pitch, I think, octave, modulation, and gate length. And I mean, often you get step sequencers which you get per step thing, and you can change a parameter and then per step, and it steps through all those sorts of things and changes parameters at the same time. This is like that, but with as far as I can work out, the added genius of actually being able to sweep the motion rather than having stepped motion. So you record your steps. Fine, you've got your steps, your notes going on. Are you with me so far? Notes going on, and you've got gates. You can change the length of the gates. So it's very much in the way like the M185 works, where you've got gate lengths to make interesting things going on per step as well. Then you have this CV knob, which you can use as modulation to send out to whatever you like, and that can be a sweep, it can be a turn, so you can have your 16 steps running along and you can dial through your cutoff on it and have that recorded as part of the sequence, not as steps but as a flowing motion. So that I really like. Also, of course, it can be more than 16 steps. You can record patterns and switch between them, and it always drops back in line and back in time, either exactly where you were or on the next reset. So it's good. It's good for live performance because you can just dial in a bit of modulation and have that record and layering up as you go, as you change things. And it's very, very easy to select a note and change and move things about. I'm a big fan of good ergonomics and good thinking that goes behind these sorts of things. And as far as I can tell from the videos I've seen, this is something along those sorts of lines. We just go, oh yeah, see, that's a good idea. That can really get things moving. I can see how I can use that to change stuff. I can see how that modulation is really going to work, and then you overwrite it into something else. It's a bit like the modulation that's in the Fusion, Erica Synths Fusion VCF. That motion knob in there is remarkably useful for all sorts of things. Just to be able to just dial in a little bit of something which then repeats itself is brilliant. Need more of that, I think, in Eurorack. Dreadbox and Sign Vibes are up to something. They've got together about a year ago. Saw a picture of them sitting on a couch taking notes and stuff, and they're coming up with some kind of plan for some kind of joint venture. Now, we know that Dreadbox are no strangers to the digital world with their Medusa that they did with Polyend. It was a combined analog and digital hybrid synthesizer sequencer thingy. So they're used to those sorts of collaborations. Sine Vibes, on the other hand, what I know them most from is the designing of oscillators for the custom multi-engine for the Korg log synths, you know, the Minilog XD, the NTS1 and the Prolog. That custom oscillator, they've created a whole bunch of those which are really good effects and oscillations, and so that makes me wonder if Sine Vibes are going to put that kind of power into a Dreadbox synth. And just when I was in the middle of editing away at the old video, there was another leak. Another little bit of information has emerged where some online shoppers accidentally published a couple of photographs and then pulled them away, but not fast enough for us to have a little bit of a look. Plus, there was a little bit of spec. And the gist of it is that the Typhon, as it's now called, is a little USB-powered mono synthesizer with a couple of oscillators from Dreadbox and a rather huge effects engine from Sine Vibes. Exactly what's inside the effects engine we're not entirely sure at this time, but there's also a 32-step sequencer. It can handle presets, up to 256 presets, and multiple forms of modulation all baked into the box. Apparently the hardware is designed to make it simple and easy to move a few things which are going to have a massive effect on lots of advanced parameters, but in a simple way so that any old idiot can have a bit of a go. I had thought that maybe Sine Vibes are going to be bringing the oscillators like they do in the Korg Prolog and NTS1. That kind of vibe, but it was not to be. This is all about the effects, which is no bad thing because little synths don't tend to come with much in the way of effects. A delay, maybe chorus reverb, that kind of thing. Having played with the Sine Vibes effects on the Korg NTS1, I know that there's all sorts of interesting stuff that could be possible there. So that combination of a nice little Dreadbox box plus some Sine Vibes DSP processing, I think could be a really nice and interesting thing. And finally for this month, the flagellate. Oh, I don't know. I'm so sorry to all the people who speak more than the pathetic amount of English that I speak, but it's something like the flare-up. I don't know. It's a box, right? And on top of it, it's got 3 springs taken from a spring reverb. It's got a couple of knobs and then some sliders. Smack the strings, they make a ka-chung type of sound, but then you can start developing as the sound gets brought back in this feedback loop. You then control the amount of feedback you want and the level of that, and it just keeps going, and these tones start to emerge. They start to overwhelm and it starts to go a bit crazy, but you have these 10 sliders which act as an EQ that you can boost or attenuate the tones that you want within the feedback loop. So it doesn't affect the output, it affects what's being fed back. So if you find a tone you like, you boost that one and that comes around and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Or if you don't like something or something's becoming too big, you can then tone that one down. You sort of play with it, you flick it, you trip it, you move it about, and you just play with these drones and this feedback that keeps going round and round. Oh, such joyful things, particularly if you then also stick it through another reverb. I mean, looking on the video demonstration, you kind of think, oh, well, that's just the most amazing thing ever. And then you realise, oh, so it's also going through some other reverb, so it's not necessarily all being made by that one device. But, you know, that's the sort of thing you're going to have knocking around anyway in your signal flow. So it works fantastically well with reverb, or if you just want it to be grungy and nasty, just use it as it is. But what a magical, fabulous thing to finish this month's Molten Monthly on. So that'll do for this month. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm sorry again that I haven't done very many videos this month because I've been essentially out of action because of terrible things going on with my back. But hopefully that will improve. I did manage to get a couple of things done. I got my kids to build the Pocket Operator Modular 400 and 170. I filmed that, so that was fun. But otherwise, coming soon, I have my review of the M185 sequencer I've been going on about for ages. I just haven't been able to sit down long enough in one place to focus on it and do it. But never mind. I've got the Bafako Perkle that I want to build, and then I've got the Stocki ratchet drum machine that I want to review. Those are the priorities at the moment. I've then got Decar's Dream to do. I've then got these pocket modulars to do as well, and then a whole load of more stuff. I've got the the random step. I've got a headphone thing coming from Music Thing that I want to build as a little kit. I've got that coming up. I've got an Ovation MIDI controller to review. Lots of stuff, exciting stuff. Lots more to come. As soon as I'm well enough to get on with it, I can assure you that I will. I also have more Molten chats coming up, all being well. I can't tell you exactly who just yet. I'm still trying to work that out. But do check out the live streams that have gone by. We just had Finley Shakespeare, who was a delight to talk to last night. So do go and check those out for interesting chats with interesting people all about modular and synthesis and songwriting and all that kind of jazz. All being well, I'll be up for a live stream this Sunday, 8 o'clock, usual sort of time and place. And we can just get together and chat about the gear and the stuff and how we're doing, maybe make some music and chill out, see how we go. It'll be good to connect back with everyone and see how things are going. Bring your thoughts, bring your questions, and we'll have a good old chinwag about things. Otherwise, please do subscribe, hit the like, come and join us on Patreon, all those things. Fabulous bunch of people over there. And stay safe, stay apart, perhaps, or whatever. Who knows what's going on anymore. In the meantime, go and make some tunes.